Welcome, friends and fellow Damons. And my guest today is Patrick Dugan, better known as Biker Witch, or Biker. Is it Biker Witch or Biker Vitch?
Just say it like a W. It looks spookier with the two V's.
Okay, it is. It's really spooky. I love it. Well, hey, welcome, Patrick. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was definitely excited when you asked me to come back on. Yeah, it's been a little bit. I don't even know how long it's been about.
I think it wasn't it before COVID?
Shit, was it that long ago? God damn.
I feel like it was.
I was
I feel
guessing
like
like maybe 2 years, but I didn't really look. So yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting.
I feel like it was before COVID. And so I want to say like maybe three years ago or something like that. But I mean, we've like stayed in touch online. We've been following each other's reels. I think you and I are both like real dudes.
Yeah.
On TikTok and Instagram, and I saw that you were starting to talk about sobriety in some of your reels, and that resonated with me because I'd been um, going through a sobriety process, I guess we could call it that, realization, or reawakening, or reconfiguration type thing. So I was really excited that you're interested in coming on here and talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I ask, was there any particular reason why you decided to go down that route?
Yeah. Uh, so I it's so where do I jump in here? Should I start from the beginning or
Wherever you think is appropriate.
so I had been I'd been drinking, forever, since I was a teenager, and I'm like 55 now. And I'd like kind of like gone back and forth with it over the years, and really like last June, or June before last, a year ago June, I kind of had like some revelations about things, and I just like stepped away from it. I just walked away from it. And then when it was Christmas, I had a drink on Christmas. I was like, hey, it's Christmas, a special occasion and stuff. And my experience of it was just so different. Um, it I no longer had a it was like I didn't get any kind of a buzz or any kind of a euphoric like feeling from it at all. It's just like it all went right down to the lowest level. And the feeling you have after you've been drinking for a while and you start to like, slow down, and it starts to get heavy and stuff like that, and it just made me feel heavy immediately. And I was like, something is like really changed here with this. And so that was it. And prior to this, um, in the time leading up to it, like I'd gone through well, I'm only going to drink on the weekends, or you know and something like that. But it just got to this point. And the other thing that was going along with this, that I have to add, um, is that I had been practicing um, sitting really into a meditation, like a morning sitting type thing, which is like kind of like another concurrent, like a parallel line with all of this, is that I had, I was like 30 years old when I was first introduced to like, meditation as a practice. And someone who was a wise teacher told me, hey, you need to do this really every day, for it to really do you any good. I said, yeah, sure. And I never, and I would always be kind of a half-assed meditator about it. I always practiced it somewhat since then, but, maybe, a couple times a week, maybe a couple times a month. Maybe I'd forget about it for a few months, and then I'd come back to it and things like that. And then sometime really like just before COVID happened, I started to really get serious about that, and I started to really get into to doing it every day in the morning for a half hour. And I got to the point where, if I missed it, I felt it. And I also got increasingly to where, people who do this practice, like, you find out that the longer you wait to do it in the day, the better chance some shit's going to come along and take you, and then you're not going to do it at all. So you start trying to do it earlier and earlier and earlier. And so I got to the point where I had worked it into my regular weekly schedule, where I'd hit it every day and feeling good from it. But then the weekends, I got to the weekends and I still had this like tradition, I guess, of staying out late and getting fucked up. And so then that would make it hard. It came into conflict with my meditation practice on the weekends. And so that's where I stood with it. And so I was still struggling with that, because still I felt that, like, quitting drinking on the weekends is just unimaginable. Right. So I was trying to find ways to work around it. And then, and it was November 15th of 2021 when I just had this experience in my meditation, that's kind of hard to explain. But just when I was done with it, I just, to make a long story short, I felt that it was, I had just changed in some way. There was some permanent thing that had been taken from that. And so then I didn't actually, so like I said, it was like June before I really just completely quit. Like from there, I was like I said, I had this thing about well, I'll still do it on holidays and stuff like that. But then, like I said, I finally got to this point where I was I just realized it didn't do it for me anymore. And that was it. I just quit.
That's awesome, man. And glad to hear that you're doing a meditation practice. To be honest, I haven't really had a consistent traditional meditation practice in quite some time, though. Kind of my first forays into the occult when I was a kind of late teenager was in Zen Buddhism. So pretty much Zen is the school of sit down and stare at the wall. So I did a lot of it really early on, and I've actually shown a lot of people how to, kind of get started with Zen meditation and stuff. But a lot of times it's interesting because it seems like people are not as interested in Zen meditation as they are transcendental meditation or guided meditations and that sort of stuff. And I think for some people, those more blissed out, you're on a beach and everything's nice, kind of meditations are necessary for people. But it's the kind of people who are high strung, probably like a CEO or an entrepreneur or something that's constantly go, 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 go. But a lot of these people, it's they need some sort of discipline in their life. So they want to do the blissed out, you're on a beach and sipping. It's dude, that's your whole life. Why don't you do something that's actually hard and sit and try and quiet the mind instead of entertaining it with more, empty garbage entertainment and just making it another way for you to get cheap dopamine.
Right. No, some people approach that honestly in the same way that they approach drugs, right? That they're looking for a psychedelic experience ultimately. They're looking for something,
shortcut.
Or a shortcut. Yeah. The style of meditation that I've practiced focuses on sensation and stillness, which I picked up. I'm mostly influenced by Gurdjieffans and a Gurdjieff group that I worked with in Houston for a few years, where we do some meditations. And another big influence on me recently I don't know if recent is the right word. Have you ever read the Secret of the Golden Flower?
No, I haven't.
So this is a book. It's a Taoist book on meditation. That's all about. It's about sensation, and it's about. It talks about the backward flowing method. It's about like circulation, or microcosmic orbit, or kind of circulation of attention through the body. And so this is a book that I read. I read it when I was like 20 something, when I was in college, and I just thought that yeah, I know all this already, and kind of like set it aside. And after I had my experience on November 15th, I mean, there was some things that happened with it, like it wasn't just the drinking thing. There's other things that changed, like my diet changed. Like I was having trouble, like I'd been gaining weight and stuff, and it's like I just couldn't stick to anything. And just all of a sudden I was able to, my appetite just like changed.
That's an interesting connection. I think anybody will notice is that a lot of times people make piss poor decisions because they're drinking. So, you stop going to the Taco Bell drive-through at 2 a.m, because you're not out drinking and partying.
Yeah. No, it's another thing. It's another thing. And I was curious about this, and I was like trying to find information on it. And so I remembered that book, Secret of the Golden Flower. And so I started reading it again, and I'm like, this is explaining everything, because it also talks about that there's a change that happens after stillness is done for a while. Now people also talk about like Kundalini, like a Kundalini awakening, which I'm not as comfortable using that terminology, because then there's a lot of other stuff that I think people like throw in with that. Again, like you said about like transcendental meditation and stuff like that, it kind of goes off into this like psychedelic. People are like looking for some psychedelic experience or some kind of escape or something like that, which is like not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for trying to be more present, trying to be more real, trying to be less subject to chaos, which is another thing in relation to drinking, is how much chaos it brings into your life. Like even like a small amount of it, and even when you're drinking, you're aware of this chaos, but you kind of take it as it's part of it, or else you assume it's like, oh, well, it happened, that would happen anyhow. You convince yourself it wasn't alcohol that was in relation to it, even though even all of the statistics about it clearly indicate, that alcohol is the cause of a lot of chaos. But just to realize how much of that chaos is not in your life anymore just gives you this breath of
It immediately comes to mind. I think of, like how many tragedies have happened like that have harmed humanity because of, alcohol being involved in the situation. I know one of my favorite painters of all time, Beksiński, the Polish painter. I mean, apparently he, like, I believe it was in the late 70s. He was in like a gambling argument over like a couple dollars, and some dude like stabbed him to death while they were drinking,
Uh-huh.
And it's like humanity lost one of these great artists over, $20 and some dice game,
Yeah. So tell me about your experience.
Personally, I grew up with a lot of alcoholism around me. It was just kind of part of the norm, part of everyday sort of life. That was just what I thought being an adult was. And then obviously, me growing up in the kind of punk and metal scene and whatnot, I was also surrounded by it when I was, a teenager and whatnot, and all those sorts of things. I moved out to Brooklyn, was going to art school out there, all that kind of stuff. So it's like always been around. And a lot of my friends are like, first generation sort of like Irish and Italian. So, like their families
You
drink a
gotta
lot.
drink.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just constant. Like, I actually used to tell people for a long time, I think, people think of alcoholism as like, that you're pissing yourself and waking up in an alleyway covered in somebody else's blood and you don't know how you got there. But I used to say, there's a different kind of like Irish European alcoholic that's like, I think some of my friends and myself included kind of started falling into, where it's this like, you wake up in the morning, like, screw it, it's 10 a.m. We're going to go outside and chop some wood, have a beer, and then it's lunchtime at noon. So I guess we'll have a beer. And then, it's 2 o'clock. Let's have a beer. And then, 4 o'clock, we're going to go for a late lunch, have a beer. 5 o'clock, maybe we'll have 2 or 3 at dinner. And then, 8 o'clock, you could have 2 or 3 more before bed. And it's like, you total it up, you had about like 10 or 12 beers every single day. Yeah, you never really got like sloshed wasted, but like, it was a fucking constant thing. It's like we couldn't go to the gas station without grabbing a beer,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a totally different thing, but you can like fool yourself into thinking, like the mind could justify just about anything and tells you, I don't really have a problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So when did you quit drinking? Like how old were you and all of that?
it's been, I'm going on 3 years now. At the end of this year, it'll be pretty much 3 years, but it's kind of the year before I went completely sober. I think I maybe had 5 or 6 drinks the whole year.
Uh-huh.
And it actually, what pushed me over was my girlfriend was actually interested in basically getting completely sober. And I was like, screw it, I'm close enough already, so let's go. But what drove me to kind of initially cut back so severely on it was that, again, a lot of my friendships, I found that like as I was turning 30, a lot of my friends that I grew up with were, and they were kind of drinking in that way that they would just drink it all the time, pretty much. And it started getting more extreme. And yeah, some of my friends basically were doing things that were causing all kinds of drama in my life where I just wasn't in a position where I was looking for that chaos and partying and stuff, but they seemed to keep figuring out ways to suck me into it. Just a few examples. I actually was at a gallery opening in Manhattan where an artist that I really look up to, who happens to know who I am. And the first time he kind of spoke with me and I realized that he knew who I was, that tripped me out because I was like, yo, this guy's legit, man. Like the fact that he even knows who the fuck I am is crazy. And I ended up bullshitting with him, and me and him connected and kind of had a lot of mutual friends and stuff. And I was really hyped to have this connection. He was throwing an art show, and I went to the art show and, was talking with him a bit, talking with the other artists. And some of my friends showed up at the art show, basically hit me up and were like, hey, can we come through? They show up sloshed, absolutely wasted. One of my friends keeps touching the sculptures. He's basically insulting people all around the gallery. He's like trying to fight some kid out front. He keeps going over to like the free drink table and just keeps pounding like right in front of him. And I'm like, dude, you gotta and he's like, oh, dude, stop being so lame. You're being like the rest of those art dorks inside and all this other stuff. And I'm like, dude, you could ruin my career right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm in a room full of people that like you're making it a bad thing that people know who I am because they see that you came with me. And then like a week after that same friend, he was basically drinking in his car down by the beach, which was only a couple blocks from his house. And he was kind of just hanging out at the beach, throwing rocks in the water and sitting on his hood and just drinking 24s and throwing them back in his car. And he went to go get in the car, and some guy apparently walking his dog was like, hey man, like you stop, the police are coming, and he flipped out, gunned it in his car, and he's got like a very distinct looking car.
Uh-huh.
He almost hits the guy with his dog, goes over somebody's fucking lawn and takes off. He decides like his house is too close, so he doesn't want to try and go back home. So maybe about a mile away from there, on the main road that kind of leads to where this had just happened, my dad lives on that road. And I'm just getting home from work. I don't know anything of this situation. I roll up to my house. I get a phone call. And my friend's like, yo, I ditched my car in your dad's driveway. The cops are after me. I
Oh
hopped
my
in this
God.
girl's car and so I got this very distinct car sitting in my dad's driveway. So I'm like, where are the fucking keys, dude? He's like, oh, I think I left them in the car. So I rush to his house. I go to try and find the keys for the car. I can't seem to find them. I want to get the car the hell out of here before the police show up at my dad's house, all this kind of stuff. He eventually rolls up home and he's like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm like, I wish I fucking knew. And I'm like, oh, my friend's drunk and apparently he just ditched his car here. He's like, are you fucking drunk? I'm like, no, I just got off work.
Uh-huh.
It's ridiculous. So the funny thing is it's just getting dark. I go inside my dad's house and I'm talking with him. I'm like, I can't fucking find the keys. Let's see if the cops show up. And I'll just be like, I don't know where it came from. He's not here. And cops never show up or nothing. But all of a sudden, there's a car sitting in the driveway. Lights on and it's dark out at this point, so I can't see who it is. And I'm thinking like, it's got to be like maybe the cops or something. So I keep looking outside and I kind of crawl outside behind my dad's truck. And I'm looking, trying to see if I could spot the car. And I'm like, that's definitely not a cop car. But I'm like, but who is that? And I can hear voices, I can hear talking, all that kind of stuff. So I pull my knife out and I'm walking closer because I'm thinking, oh, this is probably that guy that he almost hit. And he's
Uh-huh.
coming here thinking that I'm him and he's going to try and like start some shit with me. So I'm walking up and I'm trying to get as close as possible without him noticing. And some guy comes running out of the car when he spots me, and it's just like a black shape coming at me, and I'm like, yo, it's my drunk friend.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, yo, whose car is this? He's like, oh, it's some girl I met on Tinder. And he's plastered. And I'm like, yo, where are your fucking keys? I've been trying to call you, like, this is ridiculous. So I end up driving his car back to his parents' place, having to explain to them the whole situation that's going on. And then the very next weekend after that one, that friend of mine ran into an ex-girlfriend of mine that I was on very amicable sort of good terms with. It was a shitty breakup, but it went well. And he decided to tell her that I was still madly in love with her and I talk about her all the time and all this and that. So I started getting phone calls from her and I was like, you know what, dude, I'm done. And it kind of gave me a bad taste for alcohol in general. I was like, you know what, I got to stop drinking because I'm complicit in this crap.
Uh-huh.
I can't be doing it. And a lot of my friends were drinking just as much, just not getting me in as much trouble. But
Right.
I wasn't really interested in hanging out in bars with people I don't really like. Maybe I'm with 2 or 3 friends that I actually do like and 10 other people that I don't.
Yeah.
So that kind of gets old. At that point in my life, I was just going to start my business, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of was like, you know what? All I really care about is training jiu-jitsu, getting fit in the gym, working on my business, my new relationship, that kind of stuff. Drinking isn't really helping any of that.
But
Not
that's
really
part of the
keeping me
that's
on
part of the
track.
chaos. That's part of the chaos is that it connects you with these other people. It connects you with other people who are like who are subject to that chaos and it gets
Yep.
on you. It
And
gets
that's
on
exactly
you.
what it is. It's chaos. It's just
Uh-huh.
absolute. And I needed order at that point in my life. I needed a strict routine and to really just keep my mind set on my couple goals. There's only so much mental energy that you have. Let me
Yeah.
ask you though, did you lose a lot of friends when you kind of stopped engaging?
So I did it. So I made this change like later in life to where I was already not I was already not hanging out with anyone like on the weekends. Like my wife and I are pretty secluded and we don't go out to those same things that much anymore. But you go back like 10 years or so, well, I was more active. You mentioned music. I know we've talked about that before, and I did my rounds trying to make it as a professional musician, and that's where I drank a lot. I mean, it just drinking just is incorporated. It's incorporated. It was incorporated into my art, right? It was part of my art of performance and everything. And so that's something that I went through trying to learn how to do music without being drunk was a struggle. But during the time when I was ingrained in that, I can definitely look back on that now and see just incredible amounts of chaos that I was subjecting myself to at the time. And and I'm so lucky that no one, I didn't die or no one else died while I was there. And I never got put in jail, but there's so many times when any of those things could have easily happened or very close to happen. And some things that did happen though, after I was kind of safe out of that, is like one of the guys who was like, really like my best friend at the time. Well, he ended up dying like a few years later of an overdose, because his alcoholism like led to other like harder drugs like Oxycontin and stuff like that, and so he died. And then over the years, as I got more into my late 40s and early 50s, I'd hear more stories back from like my old friends back in who I grew up with and stuff, that, oh yeah, he died of liver disease. Oh yeah, she died of cirrhosis. Oh yeah, she had liver failure and she was in the hospital. And it's just like, and I started realizing, there's a price to pay. There's a price to pay for all of this stuff. And so I started to become more aware of my health. And it wasn't until after I finally like really like quit that I started to realize how unhealthy I had been, like how much it had been affecting me, how much it had affected my energy levels. Like I was always like, always like struggling for energy, and how, and this goes back to something that I think you mentioned earlier about, the Irish form of alcoholism. There's a level where there's some sense in which your body mechanically becomes used to this, like even beyond your mind thinking, oh, I want to party, or I want to do this. Your body becomes accustomed to like every 24 hours or every 48 hours we're going to get this dump of alcohol in here. So that regularness of it wears on you after a while, but at the same time your body's defenses start working themselves up to be prepared for this.
You see this in the way people eat a lot too. I mean, like I look at the way some people eat and I'm like, dude, how are you not like, feeling like shit 24/7? But it's like that becomes your reality. That just becomes your normal. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, sure. If I ate the way that somebody else does, maybe I would feel like shit because I'm not used to it. Mm-hmm. But it's crazy what the body can adapt to and what becomes the new normal. It's so hard to measure.
Yeah. Well, it's like a poison. It's like you're telling your body, I'm going to 50% of all of your work is going to be dedicated just to like filtering out this poison that I'm going to pour in there, and so the body has to like adjust to that. Whereas like it could be doing other things, and the irony in all of this is I was very into like these ideas of I always have been into these ideas about like conscious evolution. We only use, 20% of our brain. How do I use the other 80% and all of that stuff? But at the same time, the reality of it is I was like pouring this poison into myself, forcing my brain cells on my body to like not work on anything higher, but just work on saving me from this poison. Is just the irony of it.
It's interesting. Throughout my life, I feel like I've had various steps where I kind of tried to examine vices, and then as I peeled them away, try and figure out why they were there in the first place. And somebody I've actually gotten really, really into in the last few years, and his first book was one of my favorite books I've read in the last few years, was David Goggins. I don't know if you're aware of him. Mm-mm. He's a black dude, used to be a Navy SEAL, and then he got into ultra marathon running. And the guy is just kind of a tough as nails, kind of living stoic of just endurance and like voluntary suffering. And I think in a lot of ways, like the way that people use alcohol and drugs and stuff is because they're trying to avoid pain, suffering, discomfort, whether that be emotional or spiritual or physical Like people in the bar, they call it liquid courage. You
Uh-huh.
would be afraid to approach that attractive woman in the bar, let's say, but you get a couple in you and all of a sudden you could do it. But that's masking the fact that you feel uncomfortable with your level of social skills.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so instead of working on the social skills, you just keep relying on this as a crutch. And I think in a lot of ways, the pain is a lot of times what we need for growth. And like us being left-hand path minded individuals, we're constantly interested in that perpetual growth, that self-improvement, that self-deification. And I kind of couldn't justify it anymore. I'm like, if I'm using this as a crutch, then I'm trying to mask something that I should be addressing. And that's probably the key to my next level of ascent, that thing
Mm-hmm.
that I keep avoiding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me ask you, did you go back? Have you gone back and hung out with your friends that you used to drink with, sober, and noticed that did they treat you different?
I've come into contact with some of them. I'm not really close with most of them, but one of my friends I certainly did. He's a big jujitsu guy, so me and him roll together quite often. I don't have the same relationship with him anymore. I'm not going out with him on Saturday night. I'm not doing all that kind of stuff. We meet up, we roll jujitsu, we do, training, and that's it. That's about it. Um, but I'm kind of building back that relationship, which is cool because he does have positive things to offer, and his whole life isn't orientated around drinking. And honestly, I feel like being around me, he gave being sober kind of on and off a shot. Just us training, he'd ask me questions about it and that kind of stuff. And he's kind of on again, off again. I think he's just smoking weed at the moment. But yeah, so like it's cool seeing that you can be a positive influence. That even if it's just a seed you plant in somebody's brain, they're like, oh, maybe I should give that a shot. Things seem to be going pretty well for you. And honestly, in 3 years, I don't really have any regrets with giving it up. It's not like I'm sitting here and pining for, I really wish I was at Applebee's for happy hour on Saturday night. You know,
Right. Oh,
and
go ahead.
yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's because that whole culture, of like going out on Saturday night and drinking and stuff and everything else, it reminds me a lot of like the way people view pornography. Like they sit around and they eat garbage food watching people play sports on TV, and they, you know, put themselves in a state where they could be excited and sort of like because of the substances over the images they're seeing on the TV, whether it be a UFC fight or a football game. And it's like, why don't you just get some discipline, sign up for some kickboxing or some jujitsu, or go out there and throw around a fucking football. I mean, when was the last time you did that? It's like it's this
Right.
spectator kind of it promotes people staying the same and staying comfortable and staying exactly where you are, which is an Applebee's on a Friday night eating half apps.
Right. It's like you realize how much time is wasted doing that. And I think when you get sober, I think getting sober, you become a little bit more productive with things because it's just easier to use your time for stuff. Whereas like time, I mean, you're always like, I mean, for me, like when I was drinking, time was always a problem. Oh, I never have time for anything. And not acknowledging to myself that several hours is being used to just like kill brain cells, and and then like I'm sleeping too late the next day, and then when I get up, I'm like I'm not worth anything because my mind is all frazzled and my body is still tired because you're not even really like when you're sleeping when you're drunk, you're not even getting proper sleep during that time. Your body isn't actually getting the rest that it actually needs. So if you just get to a regular cycle of you know a normal 8 hours sleep and getting up at a regular hour, you find you have all this time
It's
for other
incredible
stuff.
what 8 hours of sleep can do for most people.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
The funny thing is too is I've been waking up a lot recently to get to the gym at 4 a.m. I'll wake up and I have about a half hour drive to the gym. So by the time I get there, it's about 5 o'clock, which is when the gym opens up. And yeah, getting in the lift early. Imagine if I was out drinking all night, I wouldn't be able to get to the gym at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be happening. I'd be getting home from the bar at that time.
Right. So what time do you usually go to bed now?
Um, Honestly, it varies night to night. There's some nights where I'm able to get in bed at like 8:30, which is always
Uh-huh.
cool. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it's normal, maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. And then if I do get to bed a little bit later, a lot of times maybe when I get home from the gym, I'll take a 45-minute nap or something like that. And then I still have plenty of time in the morning to get a bunch of things done. Because I
Yeah.
find, like you were saying earlier, that like the more things I can get done in the morning, it's almost like my willpower is like a life bar that gets eaten up throughout the day. And the later it gets in the day, the more likely I am to make excuses for not doing
Yeah.
the things that I can make excuses for. For me, tattooing, I start every day at 12 noon. So if I can, I would actually like to make tattooing because it's something I'm A, obligated to do because people book their appointments so long ago. And B, it's something that I actually enjoy doing. You don't got to twist my arm to get me to go tattoo and, do that stuff. So I try my very best to make that, if not the last thing I do that day, then as close to it as I possibly can. It's like my girlfriend kind of knows, like, you can ask me to do absolutely anything. Dig a hole in the yard, do the dishes, fucking knock something down and rebuild it if it's in the morning. In the evening, she knows not to ask me to do fucking anything, you know?
So what about family reunions?
In a lot of ways, I'm blessed in the fact that I don't really have a relationship with most of my biological family at this point. If I do, it's very surface. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm very much like a kind of solo person. In that respect, I don't really have an extended family. I mean, my girlfriend and I, we've been together for quite some time now, so kind of her family has become my family, but my own biological family. And I would say her family has a much healthier relationship with alcohol than my family ever did.
Okay.
My girlfriend actually, after about a year of sobriety, decided to kind of get into a 12-step program. And I don't know if she would agree with this sort of way that I see it, but from my perspective, it seemed like she was craving the social aspect in a lot of ways and wanting to have a community around her and that kind of stuff. And she met a lot of really, really cool people. And I think that's fucking awesome. Some of these people are over my house all the time, and it's cool to be surrounded by sober people.
Right.
And but her mother has now become, interested in kind of 12-step program. Her grandmother, also interested, and everybody else in the family is very supportive. So it's like super cool seeing that sort of dynamic. And that's really the people that I'm around more often than not.
That's interesting. You mentioned 12 steps. So, did you ever go to AA?
I've been to some meetings. I've been to a couple of Al-Anon meetings as well, which is more of the family and friends of alcoholics kind of
Uh-huh.
stuff. And it's very interesting to me. I've actually picked up a bunch of books recently, and I've been kind of reading through them and stuff. Partly out of seeing if there's anything helpful or useful that I can take from them, but also just out of curiosity, because so many people around me are actually my apprentice that I have at the shop has also been involved in AA for a very long time. And, it's pretty awesome. So again, I'm like constantly surrounded by sober people in various capacities, which is, super cool.
So I'll tell you my AA experience. So, when I was 22 or 23, I lived in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time. I got a DWI, and so part of the probation, I got on probation for it, and then the state requires you to go to AA meetings, and to get your card signed and like take it to a your probation officer, and they randomly drug test you. And then there's some other like there's outpatient therapy treatments that you go to, which is just another group of it's just a group of people who also got DWIs who are sitting around, and then a couple of people who like are, getting all this contract money from the state and have some kind of certification as being experts on not drinking, just basically make everyone sit around and talk and look at videos and stuff like that. And I thought that was just like, that just made me really, it turned me into more of a libertarian, if anything. It made me resent the government more than anything else, to be like forced into. I mean, I thought it was just like ridiculous. Like, none of these people are first of all, none of these people are criminals, right?
No one here poisons the well too of AA to force people to involuntarily go in there. It's like, there's all those people in there who are voluntarily in there, and it's like to be stuck in a room with.
Absolutely. So there's this outpatient thing I went to, and that was like once every couple of weeks or something, and then that was done. But then the AA stuff I had to continue to go to for like I think it was like a year, and I had to go to it like every week and bring in my card and stuff like that. And honestly, I went to like for like a couple of months, and it's exactly what you said. I felt like I think that this is all, I do not need to be here. I have not, it's like, I really regret that I got a DWI, but again, I feel that this is a problem with the state, right? Because I didn't actually I didn't harm anyone. My whole concept of like, governance and law is based on whether or not anyone has been harmed or coerced or something like that. So I think it's wrong to persecute people like this when they haven't done anything, just because you're statistically more likely to do something. So we're going to go ahead and fine you, and run you through the system. I think that's problematic. But
I actually had a friend who got a DWI, and they dragged it out in the courts for so long. This guy was really struggling. He couldn't drive. He kept losing jobs and stuff because like the area where we live is much more rural. So it's hard to get around, and the public transportation is not reliable, and it doesn't often get you to exactly where you need to go.
Yeah.
So he was really struggling. He moved out to Brooklyn. I moved out there later. Me and him ended up rooming. And he was getting really fed up with struggling living in New York City, trying to basically get places without a car, all that kind of stuff, which in New York City, you don't really need a car, but he couldn't really move back to where we were from, Long Island, about 60 miles outside of the city. And he ended up meeting this girl that was a foreign exchange student from Brazil, working at his job at Buffalo Wild Wings. And she was only doing one semester. And she decided to go back, and they were dating. And he was like, dude, I'm going to go visit her, and I ain't coming back. He's like, I'm getting so fed up with this shit. So he went down there, married her, all this kind of stuff. And basically he just skipped out on all the rest of his DWI trials that they were dragging out. And he's just been in Brazil ever since. Yeah, it's been over 10 years now. He's just been in fucking Brazil.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's funny. It's just how like this law, like the way the penal system works with this, like I think in many ways makes things like much worse. And to your point about poisoning the well, I could really feel and sense that like, no, all these other people that are here for these meetings, they're taking it really seriously, and I'm not. This is like if you're forced to go to someone's religious like ceremony or something like that, and just sit there and pretend like it, and everyone knows you're not really there for it. So I didn't go. I just have a friend. You just have a friend sign your card, right? It's completely unverifiable, and just give it to my probation officer, at the end of every month, and that was it. But the thing is now I can see like the value of doing that. Like, even because I think you said your girlfriend, she'd been sober for a while, but then she decided to like do this kind of like later on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it was about a year, and then she decided to start going. But
Right.
I think for a little while she was like, I'm not going to drink, but I still want to hang out with my friends that do.
Uh-huh.
But like it became a little weird, I guess, them having her around when she's not participating. You
So
know?
okay, so that's another thing, man. It's like I went and hung out with some of my old friends like from college, and I'm like, I'm not drinking. It was a bigger drag for them.
Yeah.
They are having a harder time with it than I am, you know?
It's like
Um,
it reminds me of my experiences when you take like mushrooms with a couple
uh-huh,
people, and then
uh-huh,
somebody who's not on mushrooms comes into like the room, and you just don't want to deal with them at all because they're
right,
not experiencing the same thing you are.
right.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's the funniest thing. It's like, I told I told my friend, look, I'm not drinking. And he's like, yeah. Well, but you're gonna drink though when we're together, right? Because it's like a special. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not. And it's like, oh, okay. And then later on, he's like, well, can't you just take something for that? Like, what do you mean? Like, isn't there just some drug you can take to do that so you'll be able to drink for the week? I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man?
Everybody's
No,
looking for the
you
magic
just need to
pill.
come to terms. I think you need to go to a 12-step program to learn how to deal with other people like not drinking around you.
Yeah, it's funny, man. In every aspect of life, people are always looking for a magic pill. They're always, wanting to prescribe one or tell if
Uh-huh.
somebody's something with. But again, like, that people have these internal dialogues, and maybe you're depressed, maybe you're feeling upset, and these kind of things, and you're looking for any way to kind of numb that feeling when maybe like your body and your mind are trying to fucking warn you, man. You're not on the path you're supposed to be on, you know? So it's like in a lot of ways, I think people that want to get on, whether it be psychiatric pills or to try and shame somebody else for, abstaining or anything like that, it's like you're trying to do everything you can to mask the fact that like of what you're doing. You're basically trying to pain manage because facing the pain would mean that you needed to answer the call and
Yeah.
make some changes, And it's like I think a lot of these negative feelings that modern people have become so adverse to and do everything they fucking can to avoid, like any sort of discomfort. It's like these things are built into us because they're supposed to help us to improve our lives, to become better, to keep evolving. Like the point of life shouldn't be to be fucking comfortable every single which way you could possibly be.
Hmm. Yeah. People have expectations of you. You realize when you make a change like that, that they expect you to to you know entertain them to some extent, and my mom used to say misery loves company, right? So they want you to feel, they want to know that you're going to feel as bad as they feel when they wake up in the morning.
Yeah, and another quote I've always really liked that's always really stuck with me that's seems similar is, people want to see you do good, but just not better than them.
Oh yeah, uh-huh. Yep.
You know, there's a cap on that.
Yep, that's very true, very true. Yep.
Something I wanted to bring up is, I think we touched on it earlier, talking about music and stuff and everything else. And I've been to too many funerals, man. I had some friends that really glorified partying because they thought it was part and parcel with, you know, being a rock star and whatnot. And then they ended up in a wooden box. And I think in a lot of ways, artists have been kind of duped into thinking that this is an essential part of the artistic process, that we need to be, kind of inebriated to make the magic and all that kind of stuff. And I think in a lot of ways, but this is just more mental gymnastics that people will do to justify however they can. And I think even we could see this on a cultural level as well, like we were alluding to with the Irish drinking style. But there was a well, so in the left-hand path, supposedly we're supposed to be these sort of against the grain, anti-authoritarian, sort of anti-status quo types. And most people drink, most people go out and party, most people are doing this. So, you're not really being countercultural at this point. And, I've kind of, for a good while now, had a bit of a distaste in my mouth for witchcraft, paganism, the occult, and even to some extent the left-hand path, because I just think it's not offering people things that are actually making their lives better. You're not having the discomfort, the suffering, the sort of pushing to get to that next level. And, it's like everybody seems to understand in this post God is dead sort of era, this Kali Yuga we're going through, that basically Christianity is sort of this laughable sort of opiate. And there's there's a quote from Nietzsche where he actually talks about that the German people had spent the better part of the last millennium willfully making itself stupid. Nowhere else have alcohol and Christianity, the two great European narcotics, been abused with greater depravity. And I wrote that down before we came on here because I think that it's really poignant, and I think left-hand path practitioners in particular, and I think by extension people who are music and into the arts and stuff, who tend to be these kind of anti-authoritarian types that are into kind of alternative spirituality and whatnot, have such an easy time getting over the fact that Christianity is an opiate, but not that the alcohol is an opiate. That these substances are an opiate, and basically weakening them and dulling them and making them okay with being in these shitty situations, and when they could do better, when they could be applying their will,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in there, man. And like what you said about, well, the whole kit and caboodle nowadays, there seems to be so much just identity politics threading all of it together, and the real essence of the ideas and the teaching are really just something that is intended for you to take and sally forth with completely independently, to the point where, because it's like wearing what, being subject to the expectations of others are what keeps you frozen. It keeps you like trapped under those expectations. What you say about musicians is so true. I mean, that the musicians, the Sid Viciouses and the Kurt Cobains, and just to name some convenient examples, but this is like all over the place. I mean, I felt this way. This is part of the expectation when I do this show. Well, no, I need to be, I need to be a little bit intoxicated, and it makes me look cooler. The crowd expects this, and I play a little better because I'm a little bit more loose. It's the same way you think, that you overcome your inhibitions to talk to a chick in the bar and stuff like that. But I mean, when you do break away from that and then you come back into your art and kind of like relearn it, right? Because you really do. It's like my neurons are all wired. They're all wired around, doing music within this like context. I had to come back into music and rewire my brain around it, and then discovered, oh, I'm actually a better musician than I thought I was. I'm actually better at this. It's just the most liberating thing you can do is to just break off your connections with other people. It's just it's just what it is. You end up, you can't go to the same places. You can't hang out with the same crowd. You need to just establish your own crowd, the cult of me.
To piggyback on the idea that you were just talking about, believing that like you need this to be good at your craft or whatnot. I actually earlier this year I got the opportunity to actually get tattooed by two of my absolute all-time favorite tattooers. Like if you asked me to write top five, these two names would be on it. They wanted to do a large scale project, so I ended up driving over to New Jersey. Probably about a 2-3 hour drive, and I got my back done by Paul Booth and Carl Grace.
I was just gonna say Paul Booth. Was Paul Booth one of them?
Yeah. So Paul Booth and Carl
Awesome.
Grace, and the two of them are kind of like gods of dark art, you
Yeah.
know. And anybody who knows more people will know Paul Booth, but Carl Grace is a very serious tattooer as well. And Carl has been sober for a very long time. He actually learned how to tattoo in prison. And there was a quote that I remember hearing from him that I actually discussed with him while I was getting tattooed. That I remember a tattoo magazine was interviewing him at a convention. And they were saying something to the effect of like, Carl, you're probably one of the most decorated tattoo artists in the world, more gold trophies than anybody. What do you attest that to? And what advice could you give to people as well, regarding that? And he said that he noticed that most of his trophies came from Sunday. And the reason being is that he said with him being sober after the convention was over every night, he'd go home, get some good rest, come in. And he doesn't think that essentially he did that great of a tattoo. He just did what he would normally do, but everybody else came in hung over. And they
Uh-huh.
came in, sort of not able to bring their A game. So he's like, basically, I just walked up to the podium and took it.
Yeah.
Everybody else was partying, probably Friday night and then Saturday night on top of it. So he's like, yeah, basically, I just got to come in and do anything on Sunday and I get the gold.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's telling, like, because again, all you hear is that, like, oh, so and so, whether it be fucking Jack Kerouac or, Jimi Hendrix or, all these people that drank themselves to fucking death, Hank Williams, one of the
Uh-huh.
Louvin brothers,
Yeah.
it just, there's this glorification of it, and people think that again, it's essential to the process, and you can't make great art without it. But it's funny too. After I got sober, I started realizing how many top performers in so many different things, in the arts, and whether it be pro athletes and people that I really look up to are completely sober.
Mhm.
And I think it really dismantles that argument that that it's just part and parcel with the artistic sort of output and lifestyle.
Yeah. No, I felt like I mean what you said about Sundays. I realized that feeling not hungover like on a Saturday or Sunday morning is like the best feeling in the world, right? Rather than, oh, I'm using this extra time, the weekend to just fuck it off. It's like you're there for it. It's like, well, I really get to like enjoy this like extra time and that feeling of being there and being present for it is so much stronger than the good feeling than the feeling of like being drunk ever could be. And I just listening to the stories like that, it's like, gosh, I think back on like all the shows that I did when I was doing music semi-professionally, and the ones I can remember anyhow. And I'm like, wow, if I had a time machine, if I could go back and do that show like completely sober, and practice for it and everything, and be ready to go for it, how incredible that would be. We used to do these, we'd go on these tours, for as long, like sometimes 30 days out, like on the road, like living out of a van, and you drink every night, every day, and every night you drink. Um, it's nothing compared with Motley Crue, that Motley Crue movie that
Yeah,
came out like recently that makes it like
yeah,
really scary. But I mean that's it's pretty accurate. Like at a smaller scale, I think every band is like that. Just scale it down to a smaller van and smaller venues, but there's still just as much alcohol and drugs around. And no, that's what happens is you get to the gig. I mean, the cycle that he like laid out in that, I'm like, no, that's exactly how it is. You get to the gig, you're hungover, you drive all day hungover, you get to the club, and you start like having some drinks there to get ready to get up for the show, because you're like shit, because you slept like most of the day. And then after the show's done, you're like fucking up and you're wired and everything. And then you just like, continue on until, 2, 3 in the morning, and then roll on to the next town. And it's just a cycle. And it's just inconceivable how in the midst of all that, it would be inconceivable to me that we like stop drinking. And that's part of your payment too. Like, so that's one thing that's different. Motley Crue's like getting like a lot of money, while they're like doing all this. But as a shitty little touring band, you're
getting paid in beer.
Right. You're getting paid table scraps, and the clubs all know, well, we'll just give them like beer, and then they won't care when they get like, $15, at the end of the night or whatever. So, and so you look at it that way. You're like, they owe this to us. So come on, like, like bottoms up. But yeah, I'm like, if I could go back in time and just have a totally different approach to that, and I think that's part of the, Gurdjieff talks about remorse of conscience, and how there's something powerful in that, and what people do over life, and part of the cycle of drinking is part of this is covering up that. It's covering up your conscience. It's covering up your remorse about the bullshit I did last night. Oh, I blacked out. Well, okay, well, I'll just forget about that. I feel bad for a few hours, but then I'll get over it like really soon. And you're creating buffers so you never like experience that. But you're supposed to experience that. We're supposed to experience remorse of conscience, because there's something about the suffering when it's like you direct your suffering internally in a creative and conscious manner, that it becomes a nourishment. It becomes something that you feed off of. It becomes like, the suffering that you can create incredible artwork with and stuff like that. So to me, that's part of the realization about the past, and I think everyone feels this, even if you didn't drink, everyone has to some extent. You look back on your life and you realize how much of it you weren't present for it, and how much of it's just been wasted,
I don't know about you, but I actually, like, thinking back on it though, I don't regret that I spent the time that I did living the way that I did, because I think it would be totally different had I not gone down those kind of rabbit holes. And I was recently thinking about it, because I've always held this philosophical idea that is very much mirrored in like Nietzsche's work, which he started out as a nihilist, and a lot of people still call him a nihilist, even though he began with nihilism and then almost dedicated his entire career to solving the problem of nihilism.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I think the left-hand path and basically philosophy as a modern person, when you look at existentialism, or I saw these ideas echoed in Zen Buddhism and Stoicism and all this kind of stuff, that like you almost have to start with nihilism, start to understand those truths about reality, the world, how things work, the subjectivity of it all and everything else. And then you need to start to build on top of that understanding a system that works for you. Basically, like you become disillusioned with the systems as they've existed. But I don't think that nihilism is a state where you should be comfortable and want to stay at. I think that's where people start getting obsessed with this kind of like suicidal ideation, or using drugs and drinking and not really having a purpose in life. But that's kind of where all the power is being able to then build a structure for yourself that then gives life meaning. And I think, again, drinking and drugs is just another form of like nihilism, which is not life affirming. It's not will to power affirming. It's not, the true will. It's giving into that nihilistic urge that is anti-power. It's anti, growth, which is the antithesis of everything we're supposedly supposed to be about, certainly on the left-hand path, but, as human beings.
Yeah. Well, it's chaos. It's chaos. I mean, that's what to me, like nihilism is like, well, everything's chaos anyhow. You know, it's all chaos. There's nothing. There's not really anything beyond
Doesn't
that.
factor in the fact that we have this incredible ability as human beings to create order out of chaos, even if it's temporary and it takes energy to do so. And basically, it has to be, like if you made a garden in your yard, that garden can produce fruits for you, and you could eat it. And of course, like if you die, nature's going to quickly take that back. You
Right.
know, the chaos is going to overtake that garden. But for the time that you're alive and you're putting energy into it and making order out of that chaos, that system produces fruits. It's
Right.
like people don't take in the fact that, like, through our efforts, we can create order. We can create these systems. And it's understanding that these systems aren't given by some creator god that like put everything in place. In a lot of ways, it's fucking us. We're the ones that create order. We're the ones that, make these systems that are, because if you really think about human life, I mean, like we need such like specific sort of prerequisites for us to exist comfortably, let alone fucking at all. Like if it was a little hotter or a little colder, objectively, like our fucking species would be wiped out. You know,
Uh-huh.
so it's our ability. I think that human beings have been able to live longer and longer and longer is the fact that we're able to create more and more and more order. Like we're able to have air conditioning and turn the fucking tap on and water comes out and supermarkets and all this
Oh
kind of
yeah.
stuff. That's all order.
Just even the wish for order, the wish for, consciousness or conscience or presence or permanence of being is a sign that there's like just that is a sign that there's something beyond chaos. And then there's I mean, what about the pyramids? I mean, that's like some that's like human beings creating some order that's like lasted for
Yep.
a long fucking time. Now entropy exists and it's being whittled away very, very, very slowly, but we create new order. We create, there's new creation. It spawns like new creation. So
Even
it's
though the fight against entropy is a fight we are absolutely going to lose, I think it's the most worthwhile fight to have.
hmm yeah.
It's you could become obsessed with death because you're eventually going to die, but if that prevents you from living with the time that you have, like what's the fucking point?
Right. Yep.
And not to say that also though I want to say that I think you get an understanding of how chaos is a positive in a lot of ways because it's needed. It's the counterbalance and it's the reason why evolution happens. And it's like I was talking about earlier with like suffering being a catalyst for change. Um, I always think of the Norse myths when it comes to like Loki being like the chaotic element that's allowed within the walls of Asgard, and he's really the only thing from that chaotic world that exists outside with his Thursian blood and stuff and everything that's allowed within those walls. And Odin kind of has a little bit of that in him as well, and he realizes what chaos is needed within a system and basically how dull and stagnant Asgard would be without that chaotic element in there. And time again throughout the stories, we see Loki's mischief and him causing problems and stuff. And then because of the problems that he started, a lot of the gods, like their main tools, their weapons, the things that they're tested for, all came because of Loki doing something that was chaotic and at the time caused a lot of issues. But then because of those issues, they were forced to evolve. And like Thor wouldn't have his hammer without Loki being mischievous and causing chaos. So the idea is to control that chaos in the same way that Odin did with only letting Loki into the building, into
Yeah.
Asgard.
Yeah.
It's like you can expose yourself to the elements and go live in a crack house and like, completely be drinking 24/7 and fucking your whole life up and wrapping your car around a telephone pole. Or, you could introduce some chaos at the gym every morning and, break down some muscle tissue and, maybe go hit a couple of sparring rounds, later that night
Right.
or something. That's chaos as well. But it's like you're controlling the chaos.
Yeah. No, it is. It's like just because you're not a nihilist doesn't mean that you're going to pretend like chaos doesn't exist or completely try to close it out of your life, but you just try to utilize it in a creative manner. And what you said about like the Norse myths, there's a lot of this comes up in a lot of like mythologies where the chaos element is like actually provides like it provides a function, right? When it's like utilized by the leadership, which in this case it represents your, Odin in this sense represents your own higher self, right? That you utilize a certain amount of chaos and you acknowledge there's a certain amount of chaos. In Taoism, it's yin and yang, right? So there's the yin, the dark yin force, which is kind of a rising, ascending force that comes up from the earth, and then and then the yang is like a descending, like solar, force that like kind of comes down. And the idea is that as these meet within the human organism, within the individual, that they get combined and balanced, and so that's why like a conscious effort, like meditation or whatever is like a conscious effort to kind of to blend and cycle those together. Whereas like when people don't do that, what happens is that there's over the yin, it just becomes like an overabundant, overabundant force, and you become a slave to chaos, right? And the ironic thing about chaos is people think of chaos as being like that's like random, right? Random is chaotic. You don't know what's going to happen. But chaos also means mechanicalism and routine. What it really means is ultimately like a non-conscious force is what it ultimately means. And it means the inertia, right? It's like chaos is like the like biodegrading, that which like biodegrades and breaks everything down again. Because we're a collection of like as an individual, you're a collection of matter that's like, that's all put itself together based on biology and DNA and stuff like that, which is gonna, you're biodegrading all of your life, like more or less, the less, and as we said about health, and drinking and everything is a testament to the fact that alleviates. You biodegrade much faster, and the more you give in to chaos in your behavior and in your diet and stuff. But by taking control of that and mastering that, you bring longevity and health to your biological organism, and also like there's also I believe like a creation of like whatever aspect of yourself that can live beyond the final degradation, because ultimately the body is going to die and fall away to nothing. And I think a totally scientific and physicalist approach to that kind of stuff, while I can see how that can lead to nihilism, and then to avoid nihilism, you rely on organizations to decide what's the best thing for us to do while we live, or live on through the state and organizations and collectivism is where I think that ultimately leads. But part of the belief or the suspicion, or however, whatever you want to call it, the model that there's something in us that can live beyond that, is tied in with the idea of that there's something beyond chaos. I don't know if that's.
No, absolutely. It's interesting you keep bringing up Taoism, because I have a lot of pride in the fact that I kind of know a little bit about every tradition. And it's interesting, the more you bring it up, the more I'm kind of realizing that everything I know about Taoism is kind of secondhand. I believe I read the Tao Te Ching years ago. I actually remember I was standing in line at the Brooklyn DMV, and I read the entire book cover to cover while waiting to get my number called. But I think outside of that, I don't really have much exposure outside of like things I've read through Thelema, some of its influence on again the Zen stuff that I was because like the influence is obvious on both of those things. Kind of ceremonial magic as a whole definitely has a Taoist sort of influence there. I've read some Blavatsky and that sort of thing, but I don't know if I have much of it directly from the horse's mouth. So you've inspired me a little bit. I'm probably going to do some digging.
Cool. Yeah, same thing. I read like Tao Te Ching when I think I was like 19 or 20. And I
It's
think I
about
was
the
probably
age I was.
I was probably hungover when I read it. But I thought this is great. No, this is really cool. And then I moved on to other things. And ceremonial magic. So one thing that I think that the West lost, and I think Christianity lost this, is that there is this sort of biological the inner alchemy. Let's call it inner alchemy, because if you studied Western occultism, we're all familiar with the concept of inner alchemy. But none of those books on inner alchemy that I've ever read in occultism really can tell you what to do in here. They don't really know. And so you end up having ceremonial magic in place of like not really knowing what's going on in here or what I can do about what's inside. And there's also a book I read a little while ago called The Philokalia. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
The Philokalia. So here's one copy of it. But this is basically there's several volumes of it, but this is all documents like from the 4th to the 14th century, written by monks, or they're generally called the Desert Fathers. And these are people who, like in the Byzantine Empire, when Constantine like made Christianity the state religion, these are the guys that said that is bullshit, no way. And they fucking just left and went to the desert, and they became like the first orders of monks and stuff like that. But when you read this stuff, when you read it, they're clearly talking about meditative practices. The way they talk about prayer, they're talking about meditation and stillness of the heart and these other things. So part of the theory, and that's all lost from church Christianity, right? That is lost completely from church Christianity. Billions of Christians over the last, couple thousand years. Prayer means you repeat the words that you were told to say. And it's a form of like supplication, and that's how it's practiced. And I don't think I'm misrepresenting it at all. And that's why we've all like understood from it. But the theory is that Christianity's like been missing all of that, and all of the West like missed out on that whole aspect of it. It stayed alive in the East a little bit, but it's kind of getting missed out on there now too, as like other things are like coming along. But Western occultism basically looked at that stuff and said, okay, well, let's change that around, right? Which Western occultism comes from. It comes from Masonry and all of that, Rosicrucianism, all these things that came up in the Renaissance. And they're all trying to oh, well, they're innovating and trying to create something, but they're using Christianity was the model. And so it became ceremonial magic. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to say some words, light a candle, drink some, have a grail, pull out a sword. All the same things that the church has been. It's all the same things that the church has been doing, but we change the names around and stuff. But they're missing the same thing that the church has been missing, which is the actual method for how to like turn that stuff around inside you and actually start unlocking that internal alchemy.
There's a podcaster. He's kind of like an entrepreneurial kind of a men's health kind of guy, Bedros Keuilian, and he did an episode that really stuck with me a couple months ago. I listened to it, and he talked about how trauma gives you superpowers, And he was just kind of talking about reframing the way that people like, because people today are so obsessed with their traumas, the things that they've
Uh-huh.
been through, and it's almost just an excuse for why they don't perform, why they don't meet their potential, all this kind of stuff. But he argued, no, actually, your traumas, they give you like unique tools in this life. They give you things like, if you can kind of practice that internal alchemy, you can turn those negative sort of things that happen to you into positives.
Yeah.
Because, if somebody didn't have those traumatic experiences that you did, they might not have the drive that you do. They
Yeah.
might not have the skills that came out of that. Like for me personally, I got kind of I was homeless at 18 years old, living in my car, and then lost the car. And by the time I got to be like 30 years old, a lot of my friends were still living at home with their parents. I had long been out, and it was because I was forced to figure it out. So I had figured out all that situation, done the internal alchemy, and therefore I was able to know how to support myself completely on my own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas these guys never had that opportunity. So what was a huge inconvenience that I was super bummed out about at 18 became a superpower at 30. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. That which does not kill us makes us stronger.
absolutely. Yeah, and dude, I'm thankful for it all. Like I've told people my life story before, and people have been like, "Ooh, that's rough," and I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm thankful for all of it. I wouldn't change any of it. If anything I regret, it's maybe that I leaned on things like escapist stuff like drugs and alcohol, like less so drugs in my case, but certainly alcohol. Like when uncomfortable situations came up that you relied on that crutch, because maybe if I would have experienced that pain a little bit more, been a little bit more present for it, I could
Yeah.
have even been a little stronger in my incarnation today.
Right. Good. Well, hey man, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Absolutely.
I've learned a lot. So, um, any final words?
Nothing really. I hope that some people out there got exposed to some new ideas. And I think anybody out there who maybe is interested in the occult and the left-hand path, I mean, you could find writings from Anton LaVey that seem to support a lot of the things that we're talking about. Nietzsche, of course. Another writer that I think many occultists, left-hand path types might be interested in, that I've been really fascinated with, is Yukio Mishima for a while now,
Oh
and
yeah.
specifically
Uh-huh.
his essay "Sun and Steel."
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I think a lot of that stuff can kind of reframe the way that people think about their vices. And David Goggins, the gentleman that I talked about earlier, he had a book called "Can't Hurt Me." Again, probably one of my favorite books I've read in the last few years. And then
I'm gonna look that up.
lastly, I'll say actually I will say the audio book of that is almost better than the print book, because they read through each chapter and then they pretty much do a podcast about the chapter after every single chapter. So you're getting
Oh,
so much more in the audio book than you are in the written book, even though the written book is very good.
oh, awesome.
Lastly, I wanted to say, if anybody is out there struggling with stuff, give a 12-step program a try, man. I'm not personally completely involved. Like I said, I've been to some meetings, that kind of stuff, but I've personally know and surrounded by people all the time that have found not only a community, but like tools to help them basically get over it. Maybe that's just that first step for you. And there's other people who are living different lifestyles out there, and you can connect with those people. You can form new relationships, new bonds, and maybe some people will be fine with your life changes. You don't need to lose everybody. Some people are going to be cool with it. But I'm sure that there's people out there that are probably struggling right now, and hopefully, like I said, the way that we're speaking, because they don't often hear these kind of conversations, uh, plant some seeds, change some perspective a little bit, and I hope you know some people maybe can change a little bit based on the things that were said here.
No, that's good. That's all really good advice. And I'd say the same thing. I know I kind of feel now like I talked a bunch of bullshit about like 12 steps, but I mean, it's like my whole point about talking about that was to say that I see the value of that now, and what is like really important is to be able to talk to people who are going through, what you're going through, but maybe it's something different than all the people that you're surrounded with right now. And it's like making that connection to connect outside of the circles that you've been in, because the circles that we're in can be as much of a trap as anything else.
And not for nothing, there's a saying in 12-step programs that basically says, take what you like and leave the rest. And in a lot of ways, in my delving into these things, like I've been reading a few books on Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous and whatnot, I definitely have found some things that definitely butt heads with my ingrained philosophy, with my years of reading Nietzsche and getting into these more sort of personal responsibility obsessed sort of writers and stuff that really informs the way that I view the world. But I keep that in mind that take what works and leave the rest. And sometimes just that community and being surrounded by people who are not in the grips of addiction is all you need to take. You could leave the rest, all the other stuff that's part of the 12 steps. If it don't work for you, then,
right.
Maybe you don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's very good. Very good advice. Well, awesome. And so also, if anyone is in the New York area and needs awesome tattoos, where's your shop at again?
It's in Port Jefferson Station, which is on Long Island in New York. We're about an hour from New York City. We're pretty close to a bunch of trains and stuff. So if you're in the New York City area, we're not hard to get to. Cool. There's a ferry literally like a mile from me too that goes across to Connecticut. So, as much as we're kind of landlocked on Long Island, it's fairly easy to get to. And then I do some traveling. I've been on a pause a little bit lately, but I am sure that will pick back up at some point. The only travel I have at the moment planned is I'm going to actually be in Europe, just on a family trip. I'm not doing any tattooing or anything, but I'll be going to the H.R. Giger Museum in Switzerland in December. God. Which I'm very excited about.
I'm really jealous about that. But you know what? I just remembered on our last conversation, 3-4 years ago, you said you were going to come to Texas.
Yeah, still didn't get to make that happen, sadly. Yep. I do need to get to Texas. Texas is on the very short list of places I need to get to. So
you do need to get to Texas, and specifically Houston. It doesn't do me any good if you go to El Paso or some shit. You need to come to Houston. Galveston's okay too. You need to come here, and in the meantime, I will continue looking for opportunities to be in the Long Island area and have an extra 24 hours so I can come get a wolf tattoo, which I'm pretty sure I know where I want it. I think about it every once in a while, and I think I need Patrick to do this, so
I'd be honored.
Awesome. All right, my brother. Well, you take care and keep fighting a good fight.
Yeah, dude, good to hear from you. It was really good catching up.
You bet. We'll talk again.
Be well.
All right. Bye.